Hi, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of That's Curious. We have a wonderful guest named Liz Entin. She is the author of WTF Just Happened, and we are going to be getting into all kinds of things, afterlife, and then some today. So, welcome to the show. Thank you for being here with us, Liz. And first and foremost, who are you and what do you do?
Hi, so I am Liz Entin. I am author and podcast host of WTF Just Happened. The book is WTF Just Happened, A Sciencey Skeptic Explores Grief, Healing, and Evidence of an Afterlife. Then there's part 2 with also another very long subtitle that people can just Google so I don't have to sit and take hours saying it. And then the podcast WTF Just Happened, all about the afterlife. No woo.
Super fun, super fun. So,
Thanks.
what are kind of the main things that you like to dive into on your podcast, if you don't mind me asking?
Sure. I, in general, go into a lot of evidence of an afterlife, of psi abilities, psychic abilities, mediumship, and I take a really grounded approach because something people don't know is there are a lot of like incredibly normal, grounded people that are exploring this. And I talk to researchers. There's university researchers studying this, and I'll have some of them on. There's psychic mediums that are studied by these researchers, and I'll have them on. And then I also have people come share their personal experiences. And, I just take a really grounded approach and kind of shift the question. I think when people think, is there an afterlife? They add a lot of, spirituality to that. They add a lot of like religion, no disrespect either, but I'm actually an atheist. And really, I'm just narrowing down the question is consciousness created by a brain or downloaded by a brain? And you don't need to add all these other layers to it. I mean, the others can be fun, but that's really the core of the question.
I am absolutely fascinated by that. And how
Thanks.
did you get here? What was your path to like getting to all of this? What really started this up for you?
Oh my God. Yeah. Because if you had told me years ago I was going to be doing this, I just thought this stuff was so weird. Like, aside from normal curiosity, I just really had no interest in this. And unfortunately, my dad passed in 2015. And, as I said, I'm culturally Jewish, but atheist, and never thought anything like an afterlife was realistic. And that's kind of when he went into hospice, is when everything changed. I kind of had a few just thoughts. Like, my very first thought was, um, you know, so much of science fiction, I'd say the majority of it ends up coming true. And, cell phones, here we are on this technology, Zoom. Um, and time travel's part of science fiction. Is there any way time travel is true? And if so, we wouldn't even know what was going on, most likely. So I Googled that and started reading all about Einstein's theories of time relativity. And so, yes, long story short, time travel is possible. It's not practical. We don't really have the ability to build the technology, but theoretically it's very possible. It's very realistic. And with that, I was just like, if something absolutely unchangeable like time travel or like time is not the way we perceive it, what else? And then my very next thought at that point, I assumed consciousness was created by a brain, not downloaded. And then I just had a thought, if this set of neurons happened to create me once, and you take the concept of eternity, eternal big bangs, eternal big crunches, the amount of what they think now are millions, maybe it's even billions of Goldilocks planets that they think hold sustainable life in the whole entire universe. And again, I think there's probably eternal big bangs and big crunches. So even if it takes 10 trillion years, it seems impossible that another set of neurons in a complex consciousness, whether it was a human or some other creature that evolved in like 10 trillion years, that another set of brain neurons would not get to be another being that I got to experience. Not necessarily a Liz, but same as with reincarnation, you experience being different beings. And well, that wasn't as good as being me or connected to my dad, when the only other thought I'd had before was assuming eternal obliteration. I was like, I'll take it. Then that's kind of where everything changed, because I was just like, if that happens, is there any way some of the memories are stored by some mechanism I don't know, and somebody has had some memories. And I Googled that, and that's where everything changed, because I had assumed that would just be like something like reincarnation and really like woo based. But that's where I found Doctors Ian Stevenson and his protege, Dr. Jim Tucker. And they are, well, Dr. Stevenson's passed, but Dr. Jim Tucker had taken over his research at this point, and they're child psychiatrists, professors of psychiatry at the University of Virginia, and they study cases of kids with past life memories from a very science data-based, fact-based perspective. And they're getting accurate results. And there is a whole department they're part of at the University of Virginia that studies the possibility of afterlife or survival of consciousness, as they would say, because that's a little more, logical based. And they study everything. They say like near-death experiences, psychic mediums, just all sorts of ways consciousness interacts outside of a brain. And that changed everything.
Wow. Yeah, I would say so. That's absolutely fascinating. Like, I'm sitting here just like, yeah, tell me more.
Yeah,
Like, I want to
immediately,
know more of
I
that.
was like, here we go.
Yeah, going down the rabbit hole. And as somebody who has personally had 2 NDEs, this
Oh, no
whole
way.
this topic fascinates me and excites me so much, because some of the stuff that I've experienced personally was absolutely wild, and we can get into that in a little bit. But Lloyd, I know that you had some questions that you wanted to start.
Yeah. I mean, I have a ton, so I'm gonna just start. I'm just gonna go right into the meat and potatoes of it all. As a person that has never experienced a psychedelic trip, had a near-death experience, or anything like that, I do come in with a bit of a skeptic eyes. However, I find my own hypocrisy as a born-again Christian. I'm like, how can you say, hey, this, that, or the other thing, and then believe this thing? But I do agree with you. I think that, like, I guess my thing is like, what can you, or what can you say, or what can you prove to us or show us, what evidence that human consciousness, us as individuals, carries on? Now that comes with the side part. I know I don't expect the ego of Lloyd to carry on beyond. I get that, but at the same token, I think
That's
there is some kind of carrying on over, whether that be, you mentioned there's been studies with children that have had past lives, and they're bringing up information that there is absolutely no way that they would know. I've seen this research, and it's so compelling to me. It's like, okay, there has to be some kind of carrying on, is there not?
the evidence. I mean, you said you want proof. I can't give you proof. There is a preponderance of evidence. And also, actually, you said, well, you can't expect the ego of Lloyd to carry on. Actually, the opposite seems to be true. It does carry
Really
on. Not,
fascinating.
yeah. And like each life kind of seems to become almost like a day. Like who you were at 5 is very different than who you are now, but there's a continual thread. So you as Lloyd, and like, I don't know if it's eternal or just a lot longer than this physical life,
Mm.
but in this continuation of consciousness, Lloyd is part of it, just as you at 2, as you as a baby. All of this becomes part of who you are and tied in. And I mean, some of the evidence I can go to, I can talk about mediumship. I could talk about near-death experiences, since you mentioned that. I could start with mediumship if you'd like. If
Absolutely,
there's
please.
Yes,
past
Yeah,
please.
life
please.
memories,
Yeah,
whatever you want me.
please.
You go, girl.
Whatever you want to. Yeah, please.
Okay. I mean, there's just so much. So like, I'm just gonna only even be able in this hour to touch on a tiny bit, which just amazes me. So, um, well, so with mediumship, I'll first start with, I'd mentioned the University of Virginia. There's some studies done of mediums. There are also um, there's been studies for years. If you look back in history, William James, Henry James' brother, was studying a medium, Leonora Piper, and there was a whole organization started, the Society for Cyclical Research, and international organization now. Some are more thriving than others, and they were studying psychic mediums under controls. And now today, probably one of the strongest institutions doing that is the Windbridge Institute. And that's founded by Dr. Julie Beischel, who was a pharmacologist, and her husband, who's also researcher in this field, Mark Picuzzi, and they conduct up to quintuple blinded studies on psychic mediums. And that means the mediums, I mean, I'll just give an example. They've done all sorts of types of research, but, mediums have to get one study, for example. I might have like little bits of it wrong, but in general, pretty accurate. The core of it will be accurate. And I think mediums have to get like 5 points right about a person, and it's like they have to, a deceased person that we'll like refer to as discarnates in this, like more of the research world. So they have to get like the relationship to the person they're giving the reading for, which is called a sitter, a memory, this person's occupation, age of death or general age, there some hobbies, personal memory between these two people. And some of the mediums are getting up to 90% accuracy, and
Wow.
they're adding serious blinding. And they do not know who the sitter is. They don't have their name. And some of them, they don't know who, they don't get anything in advance. They just get a first name at the moment of the call. And it'll be on the phone, so they can't even see the person. And there's been all sorts of variations. Sometimes there'll be a proxy sitter, like a person who doesn't know, who just takes down the information so they can eliminate that the medium is reading the person's mind. They'll have cues like some of the studies, they hit a button for yes, a button for no, and a button for I don't know. So they can eliminate the possibility of voice cues. And mediums are getting really specific information. There's also neuroscientists and brain scans being done on psychic mediums. Dr. Jeff Tarrant scans mediums' brains, and he notices varieties of unusual brain activity. And then I think something that's not really always known is there's a difference between a psychic reading and a medium reading. And a psychic reading would be when someone's sitting, say, face to face with you, and they're like, this is your future. This is your, I can read your mind. I mean, that sounds a little parlor tricky, but you get the point. The general is reading the energy of a living person. Mediumship is communicating with someone who's passed away. Mediums describe they get this information differently. And what's really fascinating is their brainwave patterns are different when they're doing different types of readings. They show brain wave activity in different regions of their brain.
It's amazing.
So I don't even know what to say about that. Yeah. So.
Well, I know like I'm a big fan of Duncan Trussell. He's an absolutely amazing individual. And one of the things he says after one of his podcasts is that, hey, you're perfect. You're perfectly designed. You were here, you chose this experience long before you became this body. Your consciousness wanted this, everything that happened in your life to happen. Everything is designed perfect. Everything's, you know what I mean? Basically, it's like a feel-good affirmation saying, look, this is designed, man. It's perfect. It's great. Don't get down. Everything's going to be all right. And I kind of took that to heart because I feel, this is just me talking here, of course, my own personal beliefs, so I have nothing to back this up, but to me, it makes sense, that everything is too perfect to, just be all happenstance. You know what I'm saying? And I just think that it makes much more sense to me that, hey, everything that happens in your life and your life and their life and their life, and it all is connected and it's all perfectly designed and has to be that way. Now, how that carries over into human consciousness after death, that's what I need.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I agree with you about it all that way here. So I just don't know. I mean, I try to just stick with actual tangible evidence. I mean, I can get a little theoretical. Sometimes mediums will say along those lines, but they can't say it from fact. Some will say to different degrees, there's still human will. This is how it's supposed to be. You come here, some say you choose your parents, you choose your obstacles. But you still, you can still get lost along the way or make, not fully accomplish what you were supposed to. Near-death experiencers, Shay, you might know this better. I'm just, from what I've heard, is people will see that and see how they're supposed to come back, or they like see how all the stuff they thought was horrible in their lives, there's a bigger picture. If I could guess, I think there's a form of a bigger picture, But
Mhm.
I would guess it's a bit of what you said, Lloyd, and a bit of, you know, just human error and confusion and complexity. And, I don't know. This is it. I'm getting very philosophical with this rather than evidence.
Mhm.
The only evidence I could say is, I guess, what some of the mediums have said, or some people who have pre-birth memories. But again, you're having to go on belief with that a little bit. And they'll say they have memories of kind of choosing this life, but
Hmm.
they also will kind of remember areas they weren't really following what they were supposed to. So
Mhm.
I can't speak about it on this life, so I certainly can't speak about it for other dimensions, I guess, is I was pretty much
Right.
saying.
Pretty loaded, but, worth
Yeah.
the ask. I mean, we're just here
Yeah.
for open dialogue, and as far as the
Mhm.
NDEs, my very first one, and I had talked about this a little bit on a previous episode. I was going through some things and was rushed to the hospital, and I was sitting in this hospital room. I had my mother there, my partner there, and I was sitting there getting like this whomming, like this weird, like, I don't know if you're a bass head or listen to anything like that, but just like the whom that you like get in your eyes and in your head. And it just kind of felt like I was going in and out. And suddenly I felt like I had the like most clear vision that I've ever had in my life. And it felt like an aerial view and like a frontal view at the same time. So it kind of felt outer body, but I was still there. And I just looked in front of my bed where my feet were. And I swear I saw my grandmother, like enough to where I thought she was there, that I told my mom and I told my partner. I was like, I see grandma at the end of the bed, and like she passed away when I was 15, and it was a few years later. And I was like, this is really strange. But my mom was like, what do you mean you see her there? And I was like, no, I see grandma. And out of nowhere, like, I'm out. Like I was just not there anymore. And honestly, I can remember hearing things and not being able to respond, and just kind of feeling like I was in a halfway in, halfway out state. So I don't know if you would fully consider that like a full NDE, but I didn't really go anywhere because I feel like I was still like attached to my body. Like I said, I could still hear everything around me, but I could hear them bringing me back. So I didn't necessarily go anywhere at that time, but that was just what I could remember from right before and all I could remember during. And after that, I was back, So I don't know. That's my like largest NDE, and another one I was in a coma for like 3 days, and I just felt like I was in dream state. Like that's all it really felt like. So it
Mhm.
felt like 2 minutes, and I woke up and it was 3 days later.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the first one could be either near-death experience or out-of-body experience. I mean, I
Mhm.
think there's sort of, if there's this non-physical dimension, and maybe it's multiple dimensions,
Mhm.
and that's where you go when you die, that's where you go when you go out of body, it's probably like, I mean, I think you go through different steps along the way, and maybe like, it's when they say often is when you can also start seeing people from the other
Mhm.
side and people who've passed, and that's both deathbed visions, near death experiences. I mean, it sounds like
Mhm.
either an out of body experience or the early stage of it.
Right. And I had even asked our previous guest, I was like, I don't know if that was just my brain creating something that I was bringing some comfort to me as I was in that experience, because my grandmother was my safe space at one point in my life. She, like, was there, prayed with me. She was a very, very
Hmm.
Christian woman. And she just,
Hmm.
yeah, I don't know. She was just always the glue. And so I don't know if my brain, because I was in stress, went to a comfort space so then I saw her,
Hmm.
and created that, or if she was there in some form or fashion. And I don't think I'll ever know until like I'm
Hmm.
not here anymore, or you know what I
Yeah.
mean. But it's just it makes me curious about how the brain works, and especially when you're in stress and all of that and what could come up. So
I
it's
mean,
interesting.
they'll say it feels realer than real. And like
Mhm.
the way you had those two types of visions sounds a bit like early stages of it. Like a lot of near death experiencers report having 360-degree vision. And they're like, you just can't really understand that as a human. You just
Yeah.
can't. And blind people report being able to see. This researcher, Dr. Kenneth Ring, did a whole book studies on specifically blind people and near death experiences. So
Whoa.
it's
I'm
just
definitely
it's
checking that
fascinating.
out.
Oh my God,
Awesome.
it's so interesting. Yeah. And they verify. And some you could ask how, I mean, the obvious question with that is how do they know they're seeing? But they're different things. Some were not blind from birth. Some And they're able to give visual information. Like, oh my God, I didn't know your hair had gone gray. Like, my husband's hair's gone gray. Like, we've been married 30 years. Or, I don't remember exactly, but things like
Right.
that. Or, they never knew this person's hair color. Some had very, very partial vision. Like, they could see shadows and outlines of things. And then they were just described that, but much more intense with different variations of shadows and outlines. And then I think one said, who'd been permanently blind their whole life, said that they knew first they were baffled. They clearly didn't know what was going on. Then they remembered seeing from like previous lives, I believe. So it was very interesting. Fascinating
Wow.
stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, it is. Oh my goodness. Boy, you look like you were about to say something, man.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
I mean, I'm trying to like keep my brain under control because as you guys
Yeah,
start
welcome
talking,
to my life.
I'm getting about 5 or 6 different questions in my head. But let's get Liz. I mean, you do take a very pretty scientific approach to all this, and that's one of the reasons. Like when I was looking for the guests, and that was an aspect of yours. Like, so what's some of the most surprising scientific evidence that you've encountered? And
Oh my God.
has that changed your perspective and beliefs going from that moment on?
I mean, it's constant surprise. I'd say, first of all, the things I already touched upon, that there actually is very valid, high evidence of this. Some of who the people are who are researchers. Like, there's 2 researchers who worked with Dr. Stephen Hawking, Sir Roger Penrose and Dr. Stuart Hameroff, who study ways that consciousness could entangle with the brain, then download by it. I think how normal the people are, just the vast bodies of research, and then personal experiences. And I guess I can share a little bit, just like some of the medium readings I've had, as well as just like weird things have happened a little bit, like getting signs. And I don't say they've changed beliefs, because I don't really use the word belief, because that kind of means that you think something without a reason to. So I'd say I think they've changed, like, how I think consciousness, our brains, the world works. And if other evidence shows otherwise, then I'm wrong. Like, I'm very open to evidence. I'll be very, very sad, but I'm also factually open that science could come up with answers one day, and the answer is not survival. I'd be surprised. I don't think that's true, but so like, for example, the first medium reading I went to, I always hide all my information. I screwed up this one, gave my phone number, but still, I kind of touch upon that in the book, why that ended up not being as big a deal. I mean, I guess I'll just say here, it's like, if they were going to Google, it's like none of them have ever been good enough to have been Google, and never bad enough to have been coincidence, if that makes sense. Like, if it's Google, they're going to be like, this was your father's date of birth, this was his date of death, this is like your family tree, and none have been that good. And all of them are so much better than we could get by chance. Like, she knew stuff about my dad's personality. She knew my cat had just passed too, and that we called this cat the sweet one. We didn't post that on social media. So my dad has a favorite color. I call it green in the book. I still kind of keep certain things secret, because I still get readings. So it might be green, it might not be. Like, I disguise some things, and some things I don't, but I don't say which. And she's like, why is he sending you a burst of green? And it was like his favorite color point. We had a little extra office in our apartment. It was all green. We would like always get green candy, or like green desserts, so it was like significant. I'd always say, like, at the end of our conversations, oh, I love you, Dad. And he'd be like, okay, great, bye. I'd be like, wait, what the fuck, Dad? Like, I just said I love you. Hello. And he'd be like, you know what I think of you. Bye. And then she laughs at the end, and she's like, I was just asking your dad if he wanted to say any messages, like he loved you. And he said, she knows what I think of her.
Oh my
And like,
gosh.
kind of
man.
caught it. And you start to see this again and again. And I mean, there were some bad readings too, which in the end, I think proves my ability to be discerning. And, I record them, and then I take notes, and I scored them. And, so because, you can walk away and say, oh, I wanted to tell myself this was what was said. But if you have the recording, and you like very honestly to yourself score it, there's no denying. And there's nothing quite like seeing that. Now I've seen, like, gotten multiple readings myself. I've seen numerous readings. I go, to, like, I volunteer for this place. I do their social media, called the Forever Family Foundation. And they're a group to help people process grief, and they have a board of they have a scientific advisory board, and they use science-based testing to certify all their mediums, and they host grief retreats, and these mediums become my good friends at this point, some of them. So I know they're honest, and I'll see them give readings that, that I know they're not lying to themselves, because I certainly have friends that have belief sets that I don't think are true, but I don't think they're lying to me when they say, oh, I mean, with all due respect, I know some people are religious. I don't want to be offensive, but, I don't really think someone's talking to a specific religious based figure. I think that's how they're interpreting it. So I don't think they're lying to me when they say that. But with these mediums, I know they're not cheating because I know their personalities. I also know the protocols of Forever Family Foundation. I know they don't have who's attending. And then I watch them just just astoundingly accurate details. Like, not, messages like they loved you, just like, and it's just not explicable by normal means.
Yeah. You hit about a point about earlier. You said about with religion and people, and I agree with that on, to a large extent. And I've actually said that to some people, like, for example, in Christianity, a lot of people will say like angels, or it's, some little person with wings, but the actual biblical description of an angel is, it's got 6 wings, there's circles around eyeballs, and people are like, what's that? And they get that, what the heck? I'm like, okay. Now, it's a very easy explanation for me. It's very logical. If you have a divine being that is all-knowing, all-powerful, created the whole entire world, okay, well beyond any existence, and they're trying to communicate with you, it'd be like us as human beings trying to communicate with an ant, and that ant goes back to the ant colony. It's like, hey, I saw these human beings. So I guess the point or the question I'm making is in your experiences, do you feel that there is a divine creator or a creator or something larger that has, or is it more likely that we're all a part of a collective consciousness?
I mean, I don't know. I tend to think there probably is not a divine creator. I just haven't seen any evidence to think that. I mean, I kind of go by the extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, which people, a lot of mediums don't like, because that's almost always said to, it was originally said by Carl Sagan, and it's always, at least I think it was. And it's always said to be like, oh, mediumship's not true. It's usually used in that way. But I have seen the extraordinary evidence that mediums are getting accurate information in ways we can't explain. And I put all this evidence together to think that our consciousness is downloaded by a brain, not created. To say there's like this one divine individual consciousness that created it, that's a remarkably extraordinary claim, even if it's socially normal. And I have not seen any evidence to make me think that. I would lean towards, of those two, that we're all maybe creating this together, which is a theory of biocentrism. There's a scientist, Dr. Robert Lanza, who's won Nobel, I believe he's won Nobel Prizes, who has that theory that we're all part of this consciousness creating materialism. I would think that's more likely than one individual, like super high consciousness, but I do think there's probably higher layers and levels of consciousness, but I would guess we all kind of end up moving towards that ourselves.
Do you think that's the goal is? Like, do you think, like, I mean, I guess this is a personal question, really. I mean, I don't,
Sure.
you know what I mean? But like, do you think that's the goal of life or this existence for now? And I think everybody can agree that, you ask anybody that's lived life or towards the end, it goes very fast. It's a spit in the bucket. Most people agree. So, a dream within a dream. We all understand that. But if we agree that consciousness goes on, isn't there, I guess what I'm asking is, does existence have to have purpose?
It absolutely doesn't have to. This could all just be some dumb coincidence, or that we could just be kind of idiots being like, this is a fun thing to do, no different than like going and getting wasted at spring break at 18, and then we're like, I mean, that's totally possible. I lean towards thinking there's a purpose, but only because that seems to be what people who have near-death experiences come back saying and what mediums say. And also, we're so purpose-driven. I mean, yes, we
Yeah.
also are idiots, and we're also just like to be silly and have fun too, but we are innately, I mean, think of the way you partied at spring break at 18. I mean, if you lived your life that way, it's horrible. It's really, really empty or really sad. Most likely, out of 8 billion people in the world, like someone who's 60 living that way, don't come at me and be like, I'm happy. There's got to be somebody. But
Yeah, if you're 60 going to spring break, I have questions.
yeah.
More power to you. Just couldn't be me.
Yeah, definitely not me either.
But yeah, no, I loved it at 18. But like overall, I think we feel empty when we're not feeling purpose driven. So I can't help but think that our emotions are giving us signals of what we're supposed to do. Otherwise, why have them? So, and all our emotions, and we don't feel satisfied unless we're working towards a purpose. So I would think there'd be a reason that's the signals we get, combined with near-death experiencers saying that, mediums saying it. It seems to be some form of purpose. Probably little individual purposes in this life. And I think our purposes here are probably smaller, but ultimately we have a big purpose. I mean, there's one cute story kind of about small purposes. There's a near-death experience researcher. He primarily focuses on near-death experiences in children. He's a doctor. His name's Dr. Melvin Morse, and he tells a story. It's actually about an adult, even though he primarily focuses on kids. But this man had a near-death experience, and he comes back, and he was like, I had the choice to come back, which is pretty common in near-death experiences. And he chose to come back. Some are not given the choice, and they're forced to come back, and they don't want to. And obviously, if they're not forced to come back and they want to stay, they don't have a near-death experience. So, we don't have that group to talk to here. And this man comes back and he's like, I have to come back. I have a job to do. And they are like, oh my God, what's your job? And they're expecting it to be this, deep thing because he came back for that. He's like, what do you mean? I have a job. I own a construction company. And he's like, I have to hire I hire all my friends from my town. If they didn't work for me, they wouldn't be able to work. They're idiots, and they couldn't feed their families. And so that was his purpose. And that's like it's small. And it's just with his little group. It's such an important purpose. And,
I mean, that's funny you say that because it may seem small, but man, I mean, if you think about it, he's really important because he's affecting
exactly
like if hundreds of lives actually. I mean, if you hired 5 people, okay, those 5 people might provide for say a wife, a kid, or I mean, it's all that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
I think there's all some kind of connection. I mean, I always believe like as people come into your life, I don't believe in arbitrary. That's I don't think anything's just happenstance. I think there's I mean, don't get me wrong. I mean, I get what you said. Like, if you're down on spring break, but there's lessons in that as well. You guess you have to party like that to get old and wise. You know what I mean? You have to be young and dumb first. So I think there's that. I think that's all part of it. Is like as we get older, but it's funny that you keep bringing up about children and like the elderly. I always said too, like it seems like there's a stage like from 10 till say 60, that age range, like we shut off from our spirituality, divineness, consciousness. But you take a young child and an older adult that's getting towards the death stage, they almost seem like they're magnets for it. And I don't know if that has been your experience or not. And the reason I bring that up is I read Dr. Roland Griffiths. He did research out of Johns Hopkins with psychedelics, and the people he studied were people that were terminally ridden with cancer or a disease that they were going to die. There was no hope for them. They would take high dose psilocybin and they would come back and they'd be totally elated as far as they weren't afraid of death anymore. They were like, look, I want to stay here. I want to enjoy my time with my people and my family, but at the same token, I'm cool. I'm ready. When it's time, I'm ready to go. And I just think I guess the whole wrap up that I'm getting at is there's definitely, in my opinion, significant evidence for something beyond whether we control that, how it's controlled, and what the purpose is beyond that. That's really the compelling, the big dig, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, they do say kids seem to have a lot of abilities until they're about 5, and
Mm.
that's also kids who remember past lives. It seems they start to forget them around 5. Like, that's what Dr. Jim Tucker's research shows. And yeah, I don't know if it's just elderly people or, even like and young people when they're terminal, they start having a lot of experiences like deathbed visions. And, you know, but there does seem to be something when, I don't know, maybe there's something about 60, where, I mean, 60 is still
Young and
Yeah,
physiologically
yeah,
beautiful.
young.
yeah,
Yeah, you're
that's
going to
pretty
be here a
accurate.
long time.
Yeah, yeah,
Mhm.
But hopefully,
yeah.
but you've had a lot more life experience. I think it's rare to find a 60-year-old who hasn't had a traumatic loss in their
Hmm.
life,
Hmm.
Mhm.
and I think there's something about when you have a loss, like I was in my 20s with my dad passing. So that's when I became very interested in it. And the people I know who I talk to, aside from, some mediums who've had like abilities their whole life, like you meet a young adult who's had a loss and they're a lot more connected to this stuff. They want to talk about it. I mean, it's obviously that's like the people coming to me and the people now I'm talk about this all the time. So I'm finding people that are interested. But I mean, other people I'll meet, like maybe at just a grief group, who've lost a parent young, and they'll be like, we'll talk about something like signs or mediums. And I think I think you sort of get some people are just always interested in this. I think also
Hmm.
people just get busy and don't have time to think about this. And then a lot of people get interested in this because they have to, they've lost someone they love.
Mhm. I think
But,
it's extremely fascinating. And one thing I want to point out, you've said signs twice, and I'm just
okay.
curious what your personal view on signs would be. Like what does that look like to you or from the people you've spoken to?
Well, the people who talk about signs, they say they're like signs from your loved ones. Like some will talk about like rainbows and pennies. I'm like, yeah, yeah, yeah. Feathers, yeah, yeah, yeah. And that was my thought when I first heard this. I'm like, this sounds like complete bullshit. But I have
Mhm.
gotten so many signs and they're so weird and they feel different. Like it's
Mhm.
kind of becomes undeniable. Like I can say my weirdest sign. I said dismissing that about feathers, but I had just read about signs and I was like, feathers exist in the world. You're going to see feathers. That's ridiculous as a sign. They blow in the wind. Like that's convenient.
Mhm.
But so I said green was my dad's color, at least that's what I call it. And I'm walking down the street. I'm in Manhattan where I grew up. And I was like living at home with my mom for a while after his passing. And I see a green feather sitting on the street. I'm like, okay, I'll consider it. Like, I'll consider
Hmm.
it. So I take
Mhm.
it home. I'm like, it's not the most expected thing to see. And I noticed, like, I always feel like when I'm getting a sign, like a little dreamy or a little sort of that meditative. So I take it home. So then, like, about 2 years later, I'm volunteering at this point for Forever Family Foundation. Oh, I'll back up a little. So I end up having a reading with this medium who's also part of Forever Family Foundation, but I just started volunteering with them. Her name's Gina Simone. At the end of my reading, which was very good, she asked me if I have any questions. And I said, has my dad sent me any signs? And she's like, oh, I don't like to say specific signs because then you'll be looking for that one and miss out on maybe others. She's like, let's say you want me to say green feather. I was like, Gina, it was a green feather. Then there is part 3, and this part is so batshit. And I've gotten other signs of this caliber too. That's the crazy thing. So like I forward like maybe the year after the reading. I'm at a Forever Family Foundation grief retreat. Gina's one of the mediums. I'm doing their social media. I'm supposed to make like little reels for everyone. I miss Gina. She ends up leaving before I had a chance to make one. I feel terrible. I go to the founder of Forever Family Foundation, Fran Ginsburg, who like sadly passed in 2020 from pancreatic cancer, but she was like my adopted mom. We're so
Mhm.
close. But so I just want to give her a little shout out. But I told her I miss Gina, how bad I felt. And she's like, okay, so just like, can you do it virtually? Just email her. So I'm like, okay. I'm the type of person when something's solved, like, unless it's ridiculously stressful, I'm not going to think too much about it. For some reason, the whole train ride home, like a song stuck in my head. I couldn't stop thinking about it. I was like, I feel so bad. I missed recording Gina. It was so amazing when she got the green feather. Oh my God. And it wouldn't stop. So I go home to like my family place at night. So my mom's babysitting my animals. I sleep there. Next morning I wake up, I am obsessing about how I miss Gina, but like that line, it was so amazing she got the green feather. So I'm taking the subway home with my animals to my apartment in Brooklyn. And it's, oh my God, that's amazing. She got the green feather. As I'm like getting to the last stop to my apartment, I'm like, green feather. Or it's like, oh, that's amazing. She got the green feather. That's it. It's just like the most annoying song pounding in my head. Walking up the stairs to my apartment. At this point, it's just going green feather, green feather, green feather. I go into my bedroom. At this point, I had like 3 roommates. I get on my laptop and there's a pile of green feathers sitting on my floor. And my lucky number, and there was one short of my lucky number, and I was like astounded. And then like I found one more the next week in my apartment and I had my lucky number. And I didn't even believe it when I saw them. I photographed them and I sent them to Fran and I was like, can you tell me if you see anything in this photo?
That's wild, man.
Insane. Yeah, absolutely insane.
How does one even begin to just, where did that come from? That's so
Exactly.
crazy. No, I
So
feel you on
crazy.
the signs thing. I openly have bounced between kind of, I would say I'm in a happy medium between the two of you when it comes to mindset on how, this world works, or trying to dive into what I believe. I've dabbled in Christianity. I've dabbled in paganism. I've dabbled in a lot of things. I'm just a very curious person when it comes to
Yeah.
belief systems, theology, what consciousness is, and why we're here, what we're doing. It's a very big thing for me. So I oh my gosh, I just sit here and I've had plenty of signs myself. I've had plenty of conversations with whatever is at hand, and or playing the hand in this life we're all living. And I used to do tarot and did all kinds of things and did my own versions of readings. And so I would come up with things that I had no idea how I was getting any of this information for people, because I'm going to be honest, at one point I was like, tarot is bullshit, and like it's just cards and you look at a picture and you kind of like make up a story for somebody, and if you do
Right.
it vaguely enough, like anybody's going to believe something. But not that I would ever bring it to people that way. Like if I was doing a reading, I would take it seriously. However, before I ever started doing readings for other people, I would just be like, what is the hype about? Or it. And the deeper I got into it, or the deeper I got into what I was calling spirituality at the time, while also doing my deeper, scientific deep dives of this consciousness thing, I felt like I was gaining a deeper connection with whatever that is. And so signs to me were important, because I would pick up like, oh, a red fox would come in, which I never see a red fox, or just amazing things kind of close to like what you're saying, or like the consistent number thing, or just things that felt like I would get like chills anytime that I felt like there was a sign that I was supposed to be paying attention to. So I just always get curious, around people's own opinions of what a sign might be, and what comes up for them and how they've experienced it, because it is pretty amazing. And it's always something that's extremely unexplainable. And you're like, that could be a really big coincidence, but I don't understand how. So I appreciate you sharing that. And it just deepens more and more questions for me, as always, of like how this all works. Everybody tell me all your opinions, please, because it's, I don't know. I'm just like word vomiting at this point, because
No, man.
my
No, I
brain
think
is bleh.
no, I think that's it though, man. I mean, isn't that really kind of, I mean, if you have, you take Liz with the feather, I'm sure there's things with you with your near-death experiences. I think signs are, you know, individually geared. Wouldn't you agree? I mean, somebody can see an object or a happening and be like, that's something, and somebody like, oh, that's just a red car, man. Like, what are you worried? And but that significance of that particular happening or car or color or smell, those things bring up those memories, man, of either something that's passed or a moment that you shared with a loved one. I mean, that's not even a belief thing. That's an absolute, I think, a human like shared thing. I don't know anybody that hasn't had some kind of experience that way. I would think.
I think For me, I would initially have thought that signs were also BS because I was just like, oh, you can make something out of nothing, law of attraction, whatever it is that you want to do.
Right.
But when it comes to the sequence of things, so say, yeah, that could be a red car. But when it's a red car of the same make and model of the same year at a same time,
Right.
that lines up with a person or a place or a memory, then it's just very interesting coincidence that all of those are in sequence. That's where I get to it, where I'm like, that's a lot of things to be happening at one time. Sure, I could see a red car, but all of that together makes me question,
Right.
Yeah. Or seeing something like out of context. You know what I mean? Like those feathers, that's so weird. Or like, one of my signs, like my mentor, Fran, that I mentioned, her name's spelled with a PH. So seeing words with F spelled with PH is a sign, So
I've never seen that before ever. That's really unique.
and
Maybe
I've had
just for me.
weird experiences with that. Like I was driving. This is gonna be in my third book actually that I'm writing, but like I spent a day with a friend and we became friends because of grief. And she doesn't really have that many other people she can talk about afterlife stuff with. So we always I drive like a long way to spend a day with her once a year when I'm in California. And we have like these long talks about this. I'm talking about it and talking about it. When I leave, I end up instead of leaving behind a license plate with the car that's says family, PHAMLEE. And Fran's organization is Forever Family. And I'm always saying she's like my family. And I was like, okay, I'll consider it. Like I sent it to a few of like the mediums. They're like, that's like an amazing sign. That's one of the best ones you can get. And I'm like, maybe I got to figure out the statistical, And her husband, Bob, is also like my dad. Like, he's very skeptical like me. He's like, yeah, that could maybe be it. And like, all of them just want to kill us because we're like, could be.
Could be.
No, I think you have to have a healthy skepticism, man. I think that's you know what I mean. If you go in and just be like, hey, it's everything I'm seeing is people are gonna look at you kind of goofy, I would think, but at the same token, if you go and you have a happening, and we had a guest on that was dealt with ghosts and ghost hunting, and she was very open and honest, and most of her experiences were there's logical explanations. However, she had plenty of stories. It was like, listen, I don't have any explanation for this. This I can't, but you tell me. And it's like those things to me. It's when the science is done, and our minds, our intelligence can take us so far. I mean, that's just truth, man. So far, and then after that, it's just like, we don't know. And I think that's what brings up the fun, the fun conversations, man. Like, what is it? Why? Why? With ghosts, why are some people open to ghosts? Why are some people open to medium messages? Why do some people have near-death experiences and come back and be able to explain it, while some people have, for lack of intents and purposes here, near-death experience, but can't recall anything. They were dead for so long, come back, and it's just like, hey, I didn't see anything. But there's definitely shared experiences with this.
Yeah.
And there's one more thing I wanted to touch on. You had mentioned downloads, like if we download consciousness or something around that. And I just wanted to also ask you, like, what do you mean by download? Like, how would you, for somebody who like hasn't heard that term or isn't like used to that, how would you explain that to them?
Oh, like the cloud, like our brains are like receptors, the way our phones and laptops are receptors, and our consciousness is in a cloud in a non-physical as we see physical in this dimension space. So downloaded by our brain as opposed to created by our brain, as opposed to our firing neurons create it. And that's the only place it is. When we die, our brain dies, there's no more.
Right.
So it'd be kind of like downloading and uploading, I guess, just like a cloud. We have experiences that kind of could upload to our full consciousness, which consists of many lives and probably from many dimensions, many physical dimensions. Yeah.
For sure. Yeah, I've heard downloads coming in. I've worked with many spiritualists who will be like, I'm getting downloads right now, I'm getting some information, or like I'm integrating after ceremonies and I'm getting downloads from that. And so like I loved that you were using that word, because I thought it was pretty cool that like that is something that I've already, you know, heard with others. And you know, some people might be like, downloading, what are you saying? But they would also go into like, you can download and upload things with hugging trees, and that's a whole different conversation. But
I know nothing about that.
yeah, and
No, I mean,
we can
there
share
is
that another time.
It sounds very, very interesting. I'm going to listen to that episode.
No,
For sure.
I mean, that is kind of a compelling. I've heard this conversation before. Is like, are your thoughts your own thoughts? Do you think you're like freely think that, or is something like, you know, basically you're being driven to think a certain way? You know, like you don't have control over your thoughts. You know, it's, you know, some chemical in your brain, and then this fires and blah 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 blah, and you know, this is the way it is. That's your, you know, quote unquote consciousness. But at the same token, like I said, man, like I give science, biology, and people far more educated than I'll ever be all the props in the world. You know, no, I would never deny that. Absolutely. However, there is just, I think at this stage, you know, as we get more, you know, AI, more technologically
I was
advanced.
just about to go
Yeah,
there.
yeah. Sorry, man. Sorry.
No,
I just
you're
think, yeah, I just think, you know, there's definitely room here that where science has to say, yeah, this is cool, our tech's cool, and look, we can prove. Yeah, I don't want to say prove, but here's some evidence. But at the same token, it's like there has to be room for the unexplained without sounding too like, ooh. But that's truth, man. Unexplained, I guess it would be, you know. So I think there's definitely something, in my opinion, something going on. I don't know if it's, you know, a god, gods, aliens, you know, one collective consciousness, one, I don't know that. However, what I do know is that if someone comes back from a near-death experience and they say, hey, I saw this, or I was at this time, I was this age, or I saw my mother, and that person might be, you know, eating themselves, or that is not bullshit. That's not a bull. They didn't, that didn't, it's not like that didn't happen to them. That very much so did happen to them. You know, we may not have been there with them on that journey or seen what they saw. I'm not saying any of that, but to that individual, that was significant, man. You know what I mean? And I think that's what, if it's that significant to these people, there's definitely, it's significant. It's you know, there has to be some higher level of significance for that.
right.
Yeah.
It was funny that you said something about the AI, because I definitely want to continue following your work, Liz, and see who you have on and talk to you about consciousness, because I'm like, I'm a nerd when it comes to like tech, and I'm a computer science major, and I'm very interested in like AI and consciousness and sentience within all of that. So I want to know if we can create it. Now, some might fight with me and be like, you're playing God, and I'm not trying to do that whatsoever. However, I'm just curious about where it comes from and what it really is on a deeper level versus just like a Webster's dictionary definition of what consciousness is, you know?
Yeah, right.
Like, I just really want to know its origin, and whether it's a cloud, or whether, you know, we're born with it and we create it, or if it's the DMT in us, or you know what I mean? Like, there's just so many different ways that this could go. So I really appreciate your work, and I'm gonna definitely keep diving into that. I can't wait for your next book too, by the way. I will be picking all of those up for sure.
1 and 2's ready. 3 will probably be, it'll be a while, maybe a little over a year probably. But I'm working on it. Working on it.
You know, great orderly design willing, I will be here to get it. So
I love it. Great orderly design willing. Oh, that's a good one.
No, I mean, no, this would be a great place to wrap up, Liz. First off, thank you so much. It's a real honor to have you sit down with your expertise. I'm sorry we couldn't even get. We could probably do 3 hours with you and still walk away with one questions. You know what I mean? Like, I mean,
yes.
it's just, but thank you so much for sitting down with us, talking with us. I'm sure viewers are going to love you. If you wouldn't mind, can you just tell us where they can find you, a little bit about your books, what to expect going forward, and just some further reading if you have any suggestions on this great topic.
Oh, sure. So yeah, you can link to all my books. They're everywhere books are sold. Except the second book, the audiobook's not ready yet, but it's close. You can get audiobook in the first. You can link to everything from my website, WTFjusthappened.net. I'm super active on Instagram, which you can link to through there. My two books talk about my experiences as a sciencey skeptic, changing my mind about an afterlife as I gather evidence, and I keep it really light and funny, and despite the topic, and try to be really honest, and kind of talk about the people I meet along the way. And yeah, and then you said you other books too. I mean, God, is that what you're saying?
Or anything, yeah. I mean, just
Um,
anywhere where anybody can
I
find you, and any
okay.
recommendations. I mean, you had a couple
Mhm.
doctors and mentors
Yeah,
along the way. So another shout out for anybody
I
you want to give a shout out. We would definitely like to hear
Oh
it.
my God. Yeah. So I would also go to the Forever Family Foundation.org website. You can look at their scientific advisory board. I would read all those people's books too. And like, or just Google them and try to find them on podcasts. Yeah, like Dr. Julie Beischel, everyone from Forever Family Foundation, some of the mediums there have books. Dr. Jeff Tarrant, I mentioned Dr. Julie Beischel, Leslie Kane wrote a good book. I mean, just all the people who changed my life. I think, some of the ones, Dr. Robert Lanza, I mentioned, who, talked about biocentrism, that our consciousness has created the universe. Just so
Mhm.
many, Stephen Hawking,
Mm.
Yeah,
string theory, string
Mm.
theory,
Oh, string
all of
theory.
it.
Girl, we're
String
going into string
theory.
theory.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah. I mean, I could list like 5,000 people. So yeah, probably,
Yeah,
yeah.
got you.
Yeah.
Well, thank
Yeah.
you again, Liz, so much. It was an amazing hour. And once again, I'm leaving with more questions than
yeah.
I came in with. And that's how I always want to leave the show. So
I got
thank you.
it.
I really appreciate you being here. We will definitely be shouting you out, checking you out. And anybody who has stayed and watched this episode, please check the link down below and go and check out all of her work and all of the people she shouted out, and stay curious.
Thank you so much.